The university halls of Central Academy buzzed with excitement. Students from different planets walked through the corridors, their various forms creating a colorful display of galactic diversity. Some had blue skin and 4 arms, others floated in small gravity bubbles, and a few glowed softly in the dim lighting. In the advanced xenobiology classroom, Professor Don stood before his final-year students. His green tentacles moved gracefully as he spoke, pointing to the holographic display showing different planets across the galaxy. Today was the day he would announce the most important assignment of their academic careers. "Students, Professor," Dan began, his voice carrying through the room's translation system. "Your final project will determine your graduation status. You must choose a planet classified as challenging and study how life adapts to survive there." 3 students sat together in the front row. Kira came from a water world called Blue Deep, where everything was calm and peaceful. Her fish-like features and webbed hands made her an expert on aquatic life. Next to her sat Vex, a thin, tall being from the asteroid belt colonies. His people had lived in low gravity for so long that they needed special suits to walk on normal planets. The 3rd student was Joran, whose people lived in perfect dome cities where the weather never changed and every condition was controlled. The holographic display showed dozens of planets, each marked with different danger levels. Green planets were safe, yellow ones had some risks, orange planets were dangerous, and red planets were considered deadly. But there was one planet that appeared in a special category all by itself, marked in dark purple. "Earth," Professor Dan said, his tentacles pointing to the purple planet. "This world is so dangerous that most species in the galaxy simply call it the Deathworld. Very few studies have been conducted there because of the extreme risks involved." The classroom fell silent. Even students from warrior cultures looked uncomfortable. Earth's reputation was known throughout the galaxy. It was a planet where everything seemed designed to kill anything that lived there. The weather was wild and unpredictable. The creatures were violent and aggressive, and the very air was filled with dangerous elements. Kira raised her webbed hand. "Professor, what makes Earth so dangerous compared to other challenging worlds?" Professor Dan's expression grew serious. "Earth has the highest concentration of deadly life forms ever recorded. The planet experiences extreme weather events regularly. The gravity is crushing for most species. The atmosphere contains gases that are toxic to many forms of life and the dominant species. Well, they have adapted to all of this so completely that they actually thrive in these conditions." Vex shifted uncomfortably in his gravity suit. "Has anyone ever successfully studied Earth before?" "A few attempts have been made," Professor Dan replied. "Most research teams returned early after brief observations. Their reports were ... disturbing. The few complete studies that exist are classified at the highest levels of galactic security." Joran looked at his 2 friends. Despite the warnings, all 3 felt a spark of curiosity. They had spent their entire academic careers studying adaptation and survival. Earth represented the ultimate test of everything they had learned. After class, the 3 friends met in their usual study spot. The university's observation deck overlooked the peaceful gardens where students from different worlds socialized safely. "We should do it," Kira said suddenly. "We should study Earth." Vex's breathing apparatus made a whistling sound, which indicated surprise in his species. "Are you serious?" "Did you hear what Professor Dan said? Teams have returned early because of what they found there." "That's exactly why we should go," Joran added, his Dome City accent making his words sound precise and calculated. "Think about it. If we can successfully complete a study of Earth, our careers will be made. No university in the galaxy would turn us down for advanced positions." Kira nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, I've always wondered how aquatic life could survive in such a hostile environment. My home world is so stable that fish live for centuries, without facing any real threats. What kind of sea creatures could evolve in Earth's chaotic oceans?" Vex considered this carefully. His people were natural engineers and problem solvers. Structural challenges alone would be fascinating. How do buildings stand up in Earth's heavy gravity and violent weather? How do their vehicles function in such extreme conditions? Joran was already accessing his datapad, pulling up the basic information available about Earth. Look at these atmospheric readings. Oxygen levels are incredibly high. The weather patterns are completely random. The geological activity is constant. And yet somehow millions of species live there successfully. The three students spent the next several hours researching everything they could find about Earth. The information was limited. But what they found was both terrifying and fascinating. Earth was a planet where volcanoes could erupt without warning, where the weather could change from peaceful to deadly in minutes, where earthquakes could destroy entire landscapes. But the most intriguing part was the dominant species, humans. The limited data available described them as bipedal creatures that had somehow become the planet's most successful species despite having no natural weapons, no thick protective skin, and no specialized environmental adaptations like other dominant species throughout the galaxy. This doesn't make sense, Vex said, studying the human data. How can a species with no natural defenses become dominant on a planet this dangerous? Maybe that's what we need to find out, Kira replied. Maybe their lack of natural defenses forced them to develop something else. Professor Don approved their proposal 3 days later, though not without serious warnings. He provided them with the most advanced observation equipment available, including a cloaked research vessel that could remain invisible to both the planet's primitive detection systems and its wildlife. Remember, Professor Don told them as they prepared to depart, you were there to observe only. Under no circumstances should you make contact with any Earth species, especially humans. Your safety protocols must be followed exactly if you encounter any situation that seems beyond your ability to handle. Return immediately. The three students nodded seriously, but inside they felt the excitement of true scientific discovery. They were about to become some of the first researchers to conduct a complete study of the galaxy's most feared planet. Their research vessel was loaded with enough supplies for a 6-month study. The ship's AI was programmed with every known safety protocol for hostile environments. Their personal equipment included atmospheric suits that could handle any known environmental threat, medical systems capable of treating exposure to unknown toxins, and emergency transportation that could get them off the planet in minutes if necessary. As their ship left the safe space around Central Academy, heading toward the outer edges of the galaxy where Earth waited, none of the three students could imagine what they were about to discover. They thought they were going to study how life adapts to a dangerous planet. They had no idea they were about to encounter life forms so perfectly adapted to danger that they had become masters of it. The research vessel broke through Earth's atmosphere on a clear morning in early June. Inside the ship, the three alien students watched their monitors with growing amazement. From space, Earth had looked beautiful, but now, getting closer to the surface, they could see just how wild and chaotic everything was. Kira pressed her face against the observation window, her large fish-like eyes taking in the massive storm clouds moving across the continents. Look at those weather formations, she whispered. They're huge. On Blue Deep, our biggest storms are tiny compared to these. Vex was studying the gravity readings on his instruments. The numbers kept flashing red warnings. This gravity is going to be a problem, he said, adjusting his support suit. My bones weren't designed for this kind of pressure. Joran was focused on the atmospheric scanners. The air composition keeps changing, he reported. The oxygen levels are much higher than our safety protocols recommend. And there are so many unknown particles floating around. Their ship's AI guided them to a landing spot in a heavily forested area. The trees below looked massive, much larger than anything that grew on their home worlds. As they descended, they could see movement everywhere. Birds flew in large groups, animals moved through the trees, and everything seemed to be in constant motion, remember, Kira said, as they prepared to leave the ship. We're here to observe only. No direct contact with any life forms. The three students put on their environmental suits and stepped outside. Immediately they were hit with sensations their home worlds had never prepared them for. The air smelled different, full of strange scents from plants and animals. The sounds were overwhelming. Birds calling, insects buzzing, wind moving through leaves, and dozens of other noises they couldn't identify. It's so loud, Vex said through his suit's communication system. How do creatures concentrate with all this noise? They set up their observation equipment near a small stream. The water moved fast, carrying leaves and small debris. Kira knelt down to take samples, amazed at how clear the water was despite all the movement. The water chemistry is incredible, she reported. It should be full of harmful bacteria, but somehow it maintains a balance that actually supports life. That's when they heard the sound that would change everything. A deep, low rumble came from the forest behind them. The three students froze, their instruments immediately picking up movement from something very large. A brown creature emerged from between the trees. It walked on four legs and was covered in thick fur. But what shocked the students was its size. The creature was massive, easily weighing more than all three of them combined. On their homeworlds, nothing this large could survive. The energy requirements would be impossible to meet. "What is that thing?" Vex whispered, his voice shaking. Dorian was frantically checking his scanners. According to the database, it's called a bear. But these readings can't be right. It shows as a normal animal, not a dangerous predator. The bear stopped at the stream, just a few meters from where they were hiding behind their equipment. It casually began drinking water, completely ignoring their presence. The students watched in fascination and terror as this massive creature acted as if everything was perfectly normal. "Look at how it moves," Kira observed. "So graceful for something that size. The muscle structure must be incredibly efficient." The bear finished drinking and wandered away, disappearing back into the forest as quietly as it had appeared. The three students sat in stunned silence for several minutes. "That was just drinking water," Vex said finally. A predator that size was just casually drinking water like it was the most normal thing in the world. Their shock was far from over. As the day continued, they witnessed one amazing and terrifying sight after another. A group of deer ran past their hiding spot, moving so fast that their instruments could barely track them. Each deer was larger and more muscular than the strongest athletes from their homeworlds. Then came the birds. What they had thought were small, harmless flying creatures turned out to be incredibly sophisticated hunting machines. They watched a hawk dive from the sky at speeds that should have been impossible for a biological creature. The precision of its attack, the power of its strike, the efficiency of its kill, everything about it defied their understanding of physics and biology. "How is this possible?" Joran asked, reviewing the recordings. "That bird just performed maneuvers that would require advanced technology on our worlds, but it's doing it naturally." Vex was studying the plant life around them. What had looked like peaceful vegetation from their ship was revealing itself to be something much more dangerous. His scanners detected dozens of chemical compounds that would be deadly to most galactic species. "These plants are producing toxins," he reported. "Not just one or two harmful substances, but entire arsenals of biological weapons. That pretty flower over there could kill our entire research team with a single pollen grain." Kira was examining the insects that flew around the stream. These tiny creatures have more complex biological systems than most intelligent species in the galaxy. "Look at this bee. It's carrying pollen that would cause instant allergic death in most beings. But it's completely immune to its effects." As evening approached, they witnessed something that would haunt their dreams for years to come. A pack of wolves appeared at the edge of the forest, hunting a group of elk. What followed was a display of coordination, strategy, and brutal efficiency that exceeded anything they had studied in their military strategy classes. The wolves moved like a single organism, communicating through sounds and signals the students couldn't understand. They separated the elk herd, isolated their target, and pursued it across terrain that would have challenged their mechanical equipment. The chase lasted for hours, covering distances that should have exhausted any biological creature. Not just hunting, Kira realized. They're conducting a military operation. The level of planning and execution is beyond what most civilized species achieve in warfare. When the hunt finally ended, the three students sat in their hidden observation post, trying to process what they had witnessed. Every assumption they had made about Earth was being destroyed by the reality of what lived there. "We've been here for one day," Vex said quietly. "One day, and we've seen creatures that shouldn't be able to exist, performing feats that should be impossible." Joran was already updating their research notes. We need to completely revise our study parameters. We're not observing life forms that have adapted to a harsh environment. We're observing life forms that have become perfect biological weapons. As night fell over the forest, the sounds around them changed, but never stopped. The new creatures emerged. Night hunters with abilities that made the daytime animals seem peaceful by comparison. The three students realized they had barely scratched the surface of Earth's true horror, and they still hadn't encountered the planet's dominant species. 3 weeks into their research, the alien students thought they had seen everything Earth could throw at them. They had documented impossible creatures, recorded deadly plants, and studied weather patterns that would destroy most civilizations. But they were about to discover something that would shatter every understanding they had about biological limits. It started as a normal morning. Kira was testing water samples from the stream while Vex analyzed soil composition. Joran was monitoring atmospheric changes when their sensors detected something new approaching their hidden observation area. Large bipedal creature moving toward our location, Joran announced, checking his scanners. It's walking upright on 2 legs. According to our database, this must be a human. The 3 students quickly activated their cloaking systems and prepared their recording equipment. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Their first chance to observe the dominant species of this deadly planet. The human that emerged from the forest path was wearing some kind of uniform and carrying equipment the students didn't recognize. He was tall by their standards, moving with a confident stride that suggested complete comfort in his environment. What shocked them most was how relaxed he appeared. He's not wearing any protective gear, Vex whispered. His skin is completely exposed to this toxic atmosphere. Look at how he's breathing, Kira added. He's taking in that high oxygen air. Like it's perfectly normal. The human, whose name tag read Ranger Tom, began his routine patrol of the area. The students watched in amazement as he casually walked past plants that could kill most galactic species, stepped over insects that carried deadly venom, and showed no fear of the dangerous wildlife they had been carefully avoiding. When a spider dropped from a tree branch onto Tom's shoulder, the students expected to witness his immediate death. The spider was one they had cataloged as extremely dangerous its venom could shut down the nervous systems of most known life forms. Instead, Tom simply brushed the spider away without even looking at it. He continued walking as if nothing had happened. Did you see that? Joran's voice was filled with disbelief. He made direct contact with a Class 5 venomous creature and showed no reaction at all. Maybe he didn't notice it, Vex suggested, though his tone indicated he didn't believe his own words. Their answer came when Tom stopped at a fallen log and carefully moved it aside to clear the path. Underneath were dozens of insects, including several species the students had marked as extremely dangerous. Tom examined them with casual interest, even allowing some to crawl across his unprotected hands before gently moving them to safety. He's not afraid of them, Kira realized. He's actually protecting them. The students spent the morning watching Tom perform his routine duties. He checked trail markers, cleared fallen branches, and made notes about wildlife activity. Everything he did seemed completely normal to him, but to the watching aliens, it was like observing someone casually stroll through a military weapons testing ground. Then the weather changed. Dark clouds had been building throughout the morning, but the students hadn't paid much attention. Their homeworlds had weather, but it was predictable and controlled. What happened next was beyond their comprehension. The sky suddenly turned black. Lightning began flashing across the clouds, followed by thunder so loud it shook their equipment. Then the rain began, not the gentle precipitation they knew, but a violent downpour that reduced visibility to almost zero. Emergency weather. Event, Vex announced, checking his instruments. Category 9 storm system. We need to return to the ship immediately. But Tom didn't run for shelter. Instead, he pulled out a communication device and began coordinating with other humans. The students listened in amazement as he calmly discussed search and rescue operations for a group of hikers who had become lost in the storm. He's going. Out in this, Joran couldn't believe what he was hearing. The lightning strikes are generating enough electrical energy to power our ship. The wind speeds are exceeding our equipment's safety limits. This is a planet-threatening weather event. Tom put on a waterproof jacket, gathered his equipment, and headed directly into the storm. The students watched their monitors in terror. As he disappeared into conditions that would be classified as uninhabitable by any galactic safety standard, "We have to track him," Kira said. This could be the most important observation of our entire study. Using their ship's advanced sensors, they followed Tom's progress through the storm. What they recorded would become legendary in xenobiology. Circles. Tom moved through the deadly weather as if it was merely inconvenient. He used primitive navigation tools to find his way through zero visibility conditions. He communicated with his team using simple radio technology that somehow functioned despite massive electrical interference. Most incredibly, his biological readings showed that while he was working harder than normal, he was nowhere near his physical limits. His heart rate was elevated but stable. His breathing was controlled. His brain activity showed high-level problem-solving and decision-making functions operating perfectly. "This is impossible," Vex said, staring at the data. "It's functioning in conditions that would kill us, even with our advanced protective equipment, and he's doing it while performing complex rescue operations." The students watched Tom locate the lost hikers after 3 hours of searching. The hikers were in a state that the students recognized as hypothermia. Their body temperatures had dropped to dangerous levels. But even these victims were still conscious and mobile, something that shouldn't have been possible given the conditions. Tom efficiently organized the evacuation, leading the group back to safety through the same deadly storm. He moved with purpose and confidence, making decisions that showed clear thinking and tactical awareness. The students realized they were watching a creature that not only survived in impossible conditions, but actually performed better under stress. When the storm finally passed, Tom completed his rescue operation and returned to his normal patrol duties. To him, the entire experience had been routine. He filed a simple report, checked on the rescued hikers, and continued his work as if nothing unusual had happened. The 3 students sat in stunned silence, reviewing the data they had collected. Tom's vital signs throughout the entire ordeal showed a being that was operating well within normal parameters. The conditions that would have killed most galactic species were simply part of his regular work environment. "He didn't just survive that storm," Kira said finally. "He used it. He turned a deadly weather event into a tool for completing his mission." Vex was running calculations on his equipment. The physical stresses he endured would exceed emergency survival protocols for our most advanced military units. But his biological systems handled it like routine exercise. Goran was already updating their research files. "We need to completely revise our understanding of what's possible for biological life forms. This human didn't adapt to survive his environment. He mastered it." The students realized they had witnessed something unprecedented in galactic biological research. They weren't studying creatures struggling to survive on a hostile planet. They were observing life forms so perfectly adapted to extreme conditions that those conditions had become their natural habitat. After witnessing Tom's incredible performance during the storm rescue, the 3 alien students decided to expand their research. They needed to understand if Tom was an exceptional human or if all humans possessed these impossible abilities. What they discovered over the next month would fundamentally change their understanding of what life could achieve. Their first major discovery came when they observed a construction site in a nearby town, using their ship's long-range sensors. They watched human workers performing tasks that should have been impossible for biological creatures. "Look at those readings," Vex said, pointing to his scanner. The ambient temperature at that construction site is 45 degrees Celsius. That's hot enough to cause heat stroke in most galactic species within minutes. The human workers were not only surviving in this heat, but were actually performing heavy physical labor. They operated massive machinery, lifted materials that weighed hundreds of kilograms, and worked for 8-hour shifts in conditions that would require emergency medical intervention for most other species. "Their cooling systems are incredible," Kira observed, studying the biological data. "They're using water evaporation from their skin to regulate body temperature. It's like they have built-in environmental control systems." What amazed the students even more was that the humans seemed to enjoy the challenge. They talked and laughed while working, showed no signs of distress, and some even removed their protective clothing when they got too warm. They're treating deadly environmental conditions like a minor inconvenience, Joran noted. On New Harmony, we have to adjust our dome climate if the temperature varies by even 2 degrees. The students then turn their attention to human, recreational activities. What they found was perhaps the most disturbing aspect of their research. Humans voluntarily engaged in activities that were more dangerous than most species' emergency survival protocols. They watched a group of humans climbing a steep rock face without any safety equipment. The climbers were hundreds of meters above the ground, holding onto tiny cracks in the stone with just their fingers and toes. One slip would mean certain death. This makes no sense, Vex said, his breathing apparatus making stressed sounds. Why would they voluntarily put themselves in mortal danger? Look at their biological readings, Kira replied. Their stress hormones are elevated, but in a way that seems to be pleasurable. They're actually enjoying the fear. The students documented dozens of these recreational activities. Humans threw themselves from aircraft and fell toward the ground at terminal velocity, trusting thin fabric parachutes to save their lives. They rode bicycles down mountain slopes at speeds that would be considered reckless for motorized vehicles. They entered icy water that would cause hypothermia in minutes, not to escape danger, but for fun. They call it extreme sports, Joran read from their cultural database. They actively seek out life-threatening conditions for entertainment. The concept was so alien to the students that they had to verify their data multiple times. On their homeworlds, safety was the primary concern for any activity. The idea that creatures would voluntarily expose themselves to mortal danger for pleasure was beyond their comprehension. Their research into human medicine provided even more shocking revelations. Vex spent days analyzing human medical data, trying to understand how their biological systems functioned. Their immune systems are incredible, he reported. They're simultaneously fighting thousands of different threats. Bacteria, viruses, parasites, environmental toxins. Their bodies are engaged in constant biological warfare. The students learned that humans carried antibodies for diseases that would wipe out entire populations on other worlds. They had natural resistance to radiation levels that would be fatal to most species. Their digestive systems could process foods that would be toxic to other life forms. They eat things that would kill us, Kira said, reviewing the data on human cuisine, capsaicin, alcohol, caffeine. These are all toxic compounds that they consume regularly for pleasure. And look at this, Joran added, pointing to medical statistics. They can survive injuries that would be fatal to most species. Broken bones, deep cuts, even partial organ failure. Their bodies can repair damage that would be impossible to heal on our worlds. The students discovered that human children were exposed to dangerous pathogens from birth, building immunity through controlled exposure to diseases. This concept of deliberately infecting young ones with harmful organisms to make them stronger was completely foreign to their cultures. Their psychological analysis revealed equally disturbing information. Humans not only tolerated stress, but actually seemed to require it for optimal mental health. They created artificial challenges when their environment became too safe, always seeking new ways to test their limits. They have a concept called adrenaline addiction, Joran explained. They become dependent on the biological chemicals their bodies produce during dangerous situations. The students learned about human sports, where individuals and teams competed in activities that involve controlled violence, extreme physical exertion, and high risk of injury. The most popular sports were often the most dangerous, with millions of humans gathering to watch others engage in potentially harmful activities. They turned survival skills into entertainment, Vex observed. Racing, fighting, endurance challenges. They've made competitions out of activities that are matters of life and death on other worlds. The research revealed that humans had developed complex social structures around managing and sharing risk. They had professions entirely dedicated to dealing with dangerous situations. Firefighters who ran toward burning buildings. Police officers who confronted violent criminals. Soldiers who engaged in organized combat. They don't just accept danger, Kira realized. they've organized their entire society around it. Some humans spend their entire lives specializing in specific types of life-threatening situations. The students documented human emergency response systems, finding that humans had created elaborate networks for dealing with disasters that would devastate other civilizations. They had protocols for earthquakes, floods, storms, fires, and dozens of other catastrophic events. They've turned disaster management into a science, Joran noted. They don't just survive catastrophes. They plan for them, train for them, and recover from them efficiently. The most unsettling discovery was that humans seem to become stronger and more capable when faced with greater challenges. Historical data showed that human societies advance most rapidly during times of extreme hardship. War, natural disasters, and resource scarcity didn't weaken them. It made them more innovative and resilient. They use adversity as a tool for development, Vex concluded. Other species are weakened by hardship, but humans become more capable. The students realized they were documenting a species that had evolved beyond normal biological limitations. Humans hadn't just adapted to their dangerous world. They had become so perfectly suited to extreme conditions that safety and comfort were actually detrimental to their development. "We're not studying adaptation," Kira said as they reviewed their findings. "We're studying evolution taken to its logical extreme. These creatures have become so optimized for survival that they've transcended the normal rules of biology." As their 6-month study period neared its end, the 3 alien students prepared to analyze their most disturbing findings. They had documented human physical capabilities, psychological adaptation, and social structures. But their final research phase would reveal truths so terrifying that their report would later be classified at the highest levels of galactic security. Kira focused her attention on human expansion patterns. What she discovered made her question everything she thought. She knew about biological limitations. Humans were not content to simply master their own planet. They were actively working to spread beyond it. "Look at these space program records," she told her companions, displaying holographic data from human space missions. "Their technology is primitive by our standards, but their approach to space exploration is completely different from any other species." The students studied footage of human astronauts working in the vacuum of space. While other galactic species required massive life support systems and extensive safety protocols for space travel, humans seemed to approach the deadly environment with the same casual confidence they showed on Earth. "They're treating space the way they treat their own planet," Vex observed. "They see it as just another challenging environment to master." The human spacesuits were incredibly basic compared to galactic technology, yet humans performed complex tasks while floating in a void that would instantly kill most life forms. They conducted spacewalks for hours, repaired equipment with simple tools, and even reported enjoying the experience. "Their psychological profiles during space missions show the same patterns we observed on Earth," Joran noted. "They're not just surviving in space, they're thriving there." But what truly alarmed the students was human research into terraforming and planetary colonization. Human scientists were developing ways to transform other worlds to suit their needs rather than adapting themselves to existing environments. They're not looking for planets that can support them, Kira realized. They're planning to change entire worlds to match their requirements. Vex had been studying human conflict patterns, and his findings were equally disturbing. Unlike most civilized species who had abandoned warfare after developing basic survival technology, humans had elevated organized violence to an art form. Their military technology is specifically designed to function in the worst possible conditions, he reported. They build weapons that work in extreme heat, freezing cold, underwater, and even in space. The students examined human military training programs and were shocked by what they found. Human soldiers were deliberately exposed to conditions that would be considered torture by galactic standards. They were trained to fight while hungry, exhausted, injured, and under extreme stress. "They're creating super predators," Vex said, his voice trembling. "They take their already impossible survival abilities and enhance them through specialized training." Human military history revealed patterns of conflict that defied galactic understanding of rational behavior. Humans had fought wars in every conceivable environment, in frozen wastelands, burning deserts, dense jungles, and underwater. They had developed tactics for fighting in conditions where other species couldn't even survive. They don't avoid dangerous environments for combat, Jorn observed. They use them as weapons. The students discovered that humans had created weapons capable of destroying their entire planet multiple times over. Yet instead of being terrified by this power, they had developed complex strategies for managing and controlling it. They've weaponized their own survival instincts, Kira said. They've turned their adaptation abilities into tools for dominating other environments and species. The most terrifying discovery came when they analyzed human cultural development. Humans hadn't just mastered their physical environment, they had developed intellectual and creative capabilities that matched their physical prowess. Their art celebrated danger, conflict, and overcoming impossible odds. Their literature was filled with stories of individuals facing overwhelming challenges and emerging victorious. Their music often glorified struggle, survival, and conquest. Even their entertainment is about dominance and survival, Joran noted. They create fictional scenarios where they face even greater dangers than their real world provides. Human scientific advancement showed the same patterns. They didn't develop technology to make life easier and safer like other species. Instead, they created tools that allowed them to push into even more dangerous territories and face greater challenges. Their space program isn't about finding safe new homes, Vex realized. It's about extending their ability to survive and dominate into new environments. The students examined human exploration history and found a consistent pattern of seeking out the most dangerous and challenging locations on their planet. They had climbed the highest mountains, explored the deepest oceans, crossed the most hostile deserts, and ventured into the most remote regions. They don't explore to find safety, Kira observed. They explore to find new challenges to overcome. Human philosophy and religion also reflected their predatory nature. Their belief systems often focused on overcoming adversity, growing stronger through suffering, and achieving greatness through struggle. They viewed comfort and safety as potentially harmful to personal development. They've created cultures that actually discourage safety, Joran said. They believe that avoiding challenges makes them weaker. As the students compiled their final report, they realized they had been studying something unprecedented in galactic evolution. Humans weren't just another species that had adapted to a hostile environment. They were the end result of evolution taken to its absolute extreme. They represent what happens when a species becomes so perfectly adapted to danger that danger becomes their natural state, Kira concluded. Their biological systems had evolved to not just survive extreme conditions, but to require them for optimal function. Their psychology had developed to seek out and create challenges even when none existed naturally. Their society had organized itself around the principle that struggle and conflict were necessary for growth and development. They're not the victims of their planet's hostility, Vex said, as he reviewed their data one final time. The reason their planet is hostile? They become so efficient at survival that they become the ultimate expression of predatory evolution. The students' final analysis was clear and terrifying. Humans had transcended normal biological limitations by embracing and mastering every possible threat their environment could provide. They had become so perfectly adapted to surviving that they had evolved into something that existed beyond the normal rules of galactic biology. Earth isn't called a Deathworld because it's dangerous to life, Joran wrote in their final report. It's called a Deathworld because it produced a form of life so perfectly adapted to death that it has become its master. The three students prepared to return to Central Academy with their findings. Knowing that their research would change how the galaxy viewed both Earth and the concept of biological adaptation, they had set out to study how life adapts to hostile conditions and had instead discovered life that had adapted so completely that it had become the ultimate expression of survival itself. Their report would carry a warning that would echo through galactic academic circles for generations. Humans represented an evolutionary endpoint that other species might not be prepared to encounter.